battery. But concept of all solid state batteries, there should not be used any kind of small kind of a liquid electrolyte at all. And the interface is more complex. I mean, you can just imagine that liquid can infiltrate and weight all the surfaces, but the solid is not a fluid, right? It doesn't have the fluid nature. So how do you create the interface from the very beginning when you make a battery is extremely important for the solid state batteries. My group has been working many areas in batteries, but then part of this kind of a solid state battery, and even on the solid state battery, my groups are working especially on developing the new solid electrolytes which conduct very fast ion, the lithium and the sodium diffusions, and their structure, diffusions, understanding through many techniques. And one of the other areas that using those newly solid electrolyte, how do you really apply into reality the solid state batteries? So I will cover into the second part of the today's conference. But before going there, this is the group. We are from this Kolkata. We call it LIFE Lab. This are the Institute for Sustainable Energy, and it is under this Institute for CCG Trace. And you can see that many students are missing, but then these two persons, of course, all of you know, Professor Rogle, who gave the first education talk here. He is our director of the center. And everybody knows here, I think, because this Professor Prasad Das spent 2 decades in Bark. He is right now with us in our centers, and actually he is helping a lot on our computation research on the materials. Just to go that, Professor Das recently, with the collaboration with Professor Das in our institute, we made a very nice, he actually helped us to, everything we make in the materials, he always helps us to, find some more insights into the computations. And as a result, that we recently published one paper with him. This is one of the solid electrolyte trigonal structures. But this has an yttrium, which is very expensive element. So the concept was whether we could replace the yttrium with some of the cheaper 3D transition metals to enhance the conductivity. And then we found one of the elements was cobalt, which is not really kind of a cheaper. But replacing cobalt actually some enhance reduce the activation energy, or also increases the diffusion pathways. So this is something that from here Professor Das really helped. So this has been done a lot of first principle calculation with the DFT and the molecular dynamics as well. But this kind of talks I'm not going to explain more right now. I will be going to the more about this interfaces. So just to give a kind of a very brief introduction that whatever we are dependent right now on the renewable energy, whether it's like a wind or solar power, those are like a renewable form. But then until and unless you have a storage, these doesn't have any kind of solution. Okay. So these are the intermittent form of energy. So when there is a supply and demand, because the solar doesn't, sun doesn't shine throughout the world every time, right? When half of the world is sunshine, half of the world is like dark. Wind also do not have any control. So until and unless we store the energy, it is very difficult for the sustainable world to be sustainable with this kind of energy sources. That is why one of the areas that we are working on the energy storage, and there are two main applications of there. One is the grid. I mean, at home, of course, you can always plug in your laptop charger, and then you can charge your computer, laptop. But how can you make electric to reach in electric vehicles, right? More efficient way, where we have like a lot of limitation about the space, weight, safety. So those are very important. So the storage of energy in these forms, how effectively, depending on where you are storing, is extremely important. And that is how the battery comes into the picture. Now, just one more briefly, I will tell you, of course, the battery exists. We all are using the batteries and the normal consumer electronics to EV to grid. But there are challenges, right? I mean, you can see the electric vehicle prices are so high but nowadays. We have to actually reduce the price down. It's extremely challenging right now because we are dependent on the most expensive elements like lithium and the cobalt. They are very expensive. Energy density, if you can just fuel your car, you can go 500, 600, 700 miles, which you cannot go with your battery EV car, right? So, of course, we want same kind of, we want to increase the energy density of our battery. Safety is extremely important. For example, like Tesla, typical these models, they use 10,000 cylindrical cells. And the energy stored of the 10,000 cylindrical cell equivalent to 10 dynamite. So basically you are driving a car with the 10 dynamite. And if a single cell fault can go, everything can go wrong. So the cell balancing, cell management system, cell safety is extremely important. And finally the recyclability, right? I mean, we know that lithium is not everywhere equally distributed in the world. There are places lithium and cobalt is concentrated. Unless we create a recyclability, we cannot create the proper ecosystem so that, after death, we can always recycle this battery. So we are less dependent on the supply chain, which is like 80 to 90% still controlled by the China. So the recyclability is one of the aspects that is extremely important for the battery. Now, this some of this problem what I have just told you, whether the solid state can solve some of the fundamental problems, not all but the few problems. What we do in solid state typical lithium-ion battery, you have a cathode, anode, and a separator, and you shoot a liquid. A liquid can conduct ions, and then the charge balance the charge because the electron is going to outer circuit and the ion is going to the to the electrolyte. Now the thing is, if you make it solid, solid means you replace the liquid to the solid. What is the advantage? Replacement of the liquid of the solid. The major advantage is that you are safe. You are creating a battery which is much more safer because all the problems of the battery, thermal safety, thermal runaway comes from the liquid electrolytes. Okay, and that is flammable in nature. So if I make a solid, if I make the electrolyte solid, putting the graphite and our cathode same, then basically volumetric wise is same, but then we lose some gravimetric energy density because solids are more dense than liquid. Okay, but then if I want to make a solid state battery, replace the graphite into lithium metal at the same time the liquid into solid, then basically we have an advantage over the volumetric energy density and gravimetric energy density. So if I want to do a safer battery, okay, with solid state, I have to replace our conventional graphite with the lithium metals. Okay, and lithium metal is extremely reactive. Okay, and lithium metal also tends to form dendrites also. So that lithium metal was the first anode has been applied 40 years before, but because a lot of accident happens of dendrite and the high reactive nature, it has been closed. But finally, the last couple of years, the whole community has realized that if you really want to have a high energy density without compromising the safety, the solid state battery with the lithium metal is the ultimate solution. And that is something, enabling lithium metal in the solid state battery is the ultimate kind of a challenges in the world. And these challenges is very open and it is a very complex system. It is a very complex and fragile system. It's really hard to work with this system. There are so many phenomena happens. So before that to go, I just want to mention, when you make a solid state battery, you need a solid electrolyte. So solid electrolyte is what is it is like a solid where the lithium or sodium, depending on which battery you are working, they conduct same speed. The diffusivity of the ion, lithium and the sodium is the same like the diffusivity in the typical liquid. There are a lot of different kinds of electrolytes, sulfides and oxides, nitride, hydride and halides. All are there. This is the typical conductivity of the liquid electrolyte, which is in the range of 10 to -2 Siemens per centimeter room temperature. There are solid electrolytes. You can see, for example, LGPS, which actually the lithium conducts same speed in solid as like liquid. Okay. So the first criteria to make a solid state battery is that you have to have a solid electrolyte which has the high conductivity same like a liquid, so that you can apply the solid electrolyte in reality in a liquid battery. And then there are all these solid electrolytes. There are many companies. I am not going through all the details, but then throughout the world there are almost like more than 40 startups are there. These are some of the big startups in the world. And for example, Blue Solution, ACS, AI, Factorial, they are mostly on the polymer-based solid electrolyte. They are using few companies, Solid Power, Toyota, Samsung, they are on sulfides. And then there are few companies like QuantumScapes and Columbium, they are based on the oxide. So depending on what kind of really you are looking for, the technology transfer or the technology progress, various sulfide electrolytes, and they all have their pros and the cons factor, which will come later. And just these are the two main, I would say, the solid electrolyte, oxides and the sulfides. Of course, hydrides, halides exist, but then there are four properties that are important. One is the ionic conductivity has to be higher, electrochemical stability has to be higher also, Third thing, mechanical deformability has to be higher so that you can actually process the battery at the room temperature, and it should not be too much sensitive to the air and moisture. So the conventional line for the battery fabrication you can also use for the solid-state battery. And if you see, the oxides has a very high electrochemical stability window, but the mechanical, ionic connectivity and moisture is they're extremely sensitive. But if you do the kind of a sulfides electrolytes, their ionic connectivity and mechanical stability, mechanically they are extremely deformable. You can see their modulus value are quite low compared to oxides. Their modulus value is very high. For the oxides, it's very difficult to reduce the grain boundary resistance. For that, you have to sinter very high temperature, which is expensive. That is why it is less kind of a popular in the community to use in the reality for the solid-state battery. But the sulfide has a, although the electrochemical stability there is more moisture sensitive, but the advantage is the mechanical formability. So you can just press room temperature and you can densify the solid sulfide, but which you cannot do for the oxides. And this is the typical solid-state battery that we make in our lab. So you can see like two plungers top and bottom. This is the peak insulating, and then we have a load cell monitor the pressure. And this is how it looks like. So we put the solid electrolyte, we place it, we measure the thickness, and then we do the AC conductivity, DC conductivity to find out the ionic and electronic charge carriers. Most importantly, you see why I am telling you the halides, sulfides are good. Sulfides, halides, and hydrides are supposed to be much better because they have the modulus values much lower in the range of 20, the gigapascals, but the oxide is higher. As a result, what you can see, sulfide electrolyte, if you place it, at the room temperature, around 500 megapascal, you can densify. You cannot see the grain boundary in the ACL. Same for the halide electrolyte, you can densify. Same for the hydride electrolyte. Hydride electrolyte, if you densify, just become kind of a polymer. You really do not see any kind of grain. But oxide, if you just densify, you see so much of surface defects are there. So that is why these electrolytes are more suitable for the battery application than oxide. Oxides always have lot of grain boundary, the resistance, and always a lot of defects, and very hard to densify the room temperature. That is why the processability aspect, these three electrolytes, hydride, halide, and the sulfides are much better. And the next part is, as I mentioned, is the electrochemical stability. So sulfide is something mostly used in the community because sulfide is much more cheaper and relatively much more less air sensitive. But if you see, sulfide electrochemical stability is so poor, it just oxidized after 2.5 volt, and you also reduced around 2 volt. So it has a very limited oxidational stability. You want to use your battery up to 4 volt, 4.3 volt, or 5 volt, right? These materials are not really suitable, although they have a very high ionic conductivity and extremely good for the processing at the room temperature. But then, what I mentioned here, this is not the stability matter. It is the electrochemical thermodynamic stability matter. The most important is that once it is decomposed, okay, if the interface has been passivated or not. For example, the liquid electrolyte nowadays we use for the battery, they are not thermodynamically stable at the voltage we want. But then they decompose to passivate the interface. Once the passivation happens, there is no further decomposition. Same thing happened for this sulfide also. See, for example, this is one of the typical sulfide electrolyte. One is contact with the lithium, these are the products. And all these products are ionically conducting or insulting in nature. None of this is electronically conducting. Once you do not have any electronically conducting, at the interface, there is no leakage of the electron pathway. So your interface actually becomes stable. For example, this is another sulfide based ionic conductor which is 10 times higher conductivity than this one. But then once it is decomposed, one of the compounds is the electronically conductor. So although this is highly stable, but this because of this electronically conductive materials at the interface, this interface is corrosive in nature. So slowly it grows and short the cells. So what I mean, the ionic conductivity really, of course it matters, but after a certain time, the more than ionic conductivity, the how interface stability, how the interface passivation happens, that matters more in the solid-state battery rather than the very high ionic conductivity. And so the thing is, one of the problems is that, so this interface is not stable. But then how can we understand this interface? Normally in liquid it's very easy to characterize. You have this interface, you open the cell, you wash it and do expiation, whatever you wish to do, right? But they solid the interface on the body. You cannot just detach the interface. So to understand this reactivity of this solid electrolyte with the lithium, we actually developed a new technique in situ XPS, which is something I will explain. And this is one of the solid electrolyte, lithium chloride, which is, we can see if we make a symmetric ceramic phasing, it's not stable and impedance is also growing. That means this material is not stable with the lithium metal. And we can see, optically that it tends to become black color and this color is slowly going. Okay. But then, how can we understand this interface? Like, what are the product and the dynamics of the interface? So we develop a technique called in-situ XPS. What we do, we have a solid electrolyte. On the bottom, we put a lithium metal, and inside the XPS chamber, we put an electron gun. Once you put the electron gun on top of insulating substrate, your electron accumulation takes place. And once the electron accumulation takes place, you have a voltage between your top and the bottom. And once the voltage difference, the lithium comes to top. Lithium actually migrates to top of the surface. And once the lithium migrates top of the surface, it starts reacting on the solid electrolyte. And at the same time, you can do XPS and find it out, okay, what are the reaction product and how the reaction product is developed. See, this is one of the examples that I'm showing, but there are many examples we did in our. So here you can see this lithium start nucleation after a certain time. Okay, once you keeps on putting the charge, and then the yttrium is also getting reduced to yttrium metals, which is thermodynamically what we see like this is yttrium metal and lithium chloride takes place. So this is something that we can found how the reaction exactly takes place at the interface. But the most importantly, yttrium directly doesn't reduce to yttrium. Yttrium-3 here doesn't directly reduce to yttrium metal. There is a lot of intermediate states are there. And what we found, one of the states is yttrium chloride, YCl. Okay, and YCl is kind of a metallic in nature. So why this interface is not stable? One of the reasons is that there is the existence of a metallic yttrium chloride phase is there, and because of this metallic phase, your electrons start kind of this actually helps to electronic charge carrier to go through to the solid electrolyte and start corrosion takes place. And this is the metastable state. If you take it like kind of a the XRD after certain time, you see this peak is also getting dissolved. So this is a very unique thing that we found that lot of we do calculation to find out lot of thermodynamically stable product, but there's a lot of intermediate product that we can found in this technique, and then those intermediate product basically influences a lot about how the interface could be stable or not. So this is something is very important. This has just been published this year in Chemistry of Materials. It's a very big paper. I'm just showing you just part of it. There are many new information about the solid electrolyte interface we can found in this paper. And so there are very general. I'm telling you there are 4 types of interface. One is like a passive, one is like a continuously growing interface where there is metallic, electronic conductive substance are there at the interface. Interface which is passivated, there is no electronically conductive materials is there. There are interface which is kinetically stable. There nothing happens room temperature. Once you heat it, basically it's become reactive. And there are interface which is called like a rebound interface. Like for some material which is thermodynamically stable, it doesn't weight the interface with the metal. So that interface we call the rebound interface, and there is always a gap in the interface. It's not fully weighted. And this interface also is not a good interface because all these gaps create a lot of geometric constriction resistance, but the current is funneling through a specific area, and that also created a kind of interface. Okay. So this is so overall I can see sulfide solid electrolytes are good for the anode, whereas the halide is lithium chloride which I shown, it is not good for the anode side. So sulfide is supposed to be the one of the good solid electrolytes for the anode side. Now for the cathode side, if I see, this is a typical NCA which is used for the Tesla. If you put the cathode into the solid electrolyte typical sulfur, then actually it reacts. Without any kind of intrinsically react, because the cobalt metals are very reactive with the sulfur. But if you charge it, this cathode at the high voltage, then the reaction is higher because the metal has even higher oxidation state. Okay. So we did lot of XRD, Raman, and then also molecular dynamic stimulation to understand, okay, in the ground state as well as in the high charge state, what kind of reaction is happening or what kind of conformation is there. But then fundamentally this is not really stable. And then we actually try to passivate the interface with coating. So the cathode is intrinsically not stable, but if you do a very thin coating of some resistive layer which helps to ion contact but doesn't react with the sulfide, then it can stabilize the interface. So there is a thin coating. So there are many A criteria for the coating, it has to be phase stable, it has to be chemical compatible with the sulfide and oxide, it has to be high electrochemical stability, and ionic conductivity has to be higher, electronic conductivity has to be lower. So with all these, basically we have done a very thin niobium coating, lithium niobate coating. Lithium niobate is something electronically insulator but ionically conductor. So we can do very solution processes coating, and without coating you can see the black, and with coating you can see the red graph. Even a small coating of resistive coating can reduce the interfacial chemical reaction, interfacial cross diffusion, and stabilize the interface which is stable. So although sulfide are not stable, but there is a way that you can stabilize the interface on the cathode side as well and to make it better. Now there is one more thing. Even you can do lot of modifications on the cathode surface, but still the most important, the most stable solid electrolyte on the cathode side is the halide. You can see the lithium chloride, and then this is the sulfide electrolyte has been made. So there are 3 cells with the same cathode, but then once you have the chloride, you have the highest Coulombic efficiency, and once you have the sulfide, you have the least Coulombic efficiency, and even on the impedance also you can see. So that means, like, although you can passivate the interface by some kind of a coating, but there is a long term, there is always some reactions going on with the sulfide. But the halides are supposed to be very stable with the kind of a cathode material. But the problem is that the halides are not stable on the anode. So sulfides electrolytes are good for the anode, whereas the halides are not suitable for the cathode side. So then this is a typical picture. If you can see the cathode side, cathode side the halide is good, but the anode side the sulfide is good. Okay, but then how can you make it then a very nice solid state battery? So what we do, we make a bilayer cell where the anode exposed with the sulfide and the cathode exposed with the halide electrolyte. But then once you make a bilayer cells, then basically you create another interface. You see, you create another interface, which is another problem. Okay, and then we try to understand. Okay, there are many halides are there. Whether all the halide electrolytes are really stable with the sulfides, and then this halide electrolyte, we take 2 examples. One is the yttrium and one is the indium, and we take a impedance spectroscopy at 160° temperature to exacerbate the kinetics and try to understand the reactivity between these 2 interfaces. See, the lithium and the sulfide interface is quite stable even at 160° temperature, but the indium interface you see is slowly growing. That means that some kind of parasitic reactions are happening when you actually the indium sulfide interface rather than the yttrium sulfide interface. So even on the halide and sulfide, there are specific halides which are stable, and there are few halides which are not stable. And then we do some synchrotron temperature dependent X-ray with the sulfide and yttrium, where high temperature also we do not find any kind of phase, but the indium we can see there are new phases are coming, indium phosphide and other. And then we try to and then we try to kind of find out why such reactivity is happening, and then this is a typical descriptor that we have designed that, okay, from yttrium to zirconium, if you go, the electronegativity is higher, for the zirconium the reactivity is higher, whereas the less electronegativity is the yttrium, the reactivity is lower. So this is kind of a design criteria when you make a bilayer cell, what kind of a halide solid electrolyte you want to combine with the sulfide. And this has been published on SA's Energy Data this year. I will not go through details on this part, but I just want to mention one thing, that one of the biggest problems of the solid state battery is the lithium metal, is the beyond chemical, electrochemical is the lithium dendrite formation. Okay, and then the lithium is the homologous temperature is close to room temperature, so it has an inherent tendency to creep at a pressure and temperature, and it has a very low lithium cell diffusivity. So deposition of the lithium is very challenging. Even the small lithium nucleation behaves like a ceramic because it has a very low dislocation density. Okay, so we actually try to understand how the lithium metal deposition takes place with respect to pressure. Okay, and typical this kind of a cells we make where we put a load cell to monitor the pressure, and this is our solid state cells. What we found is very fantastic data that very first time. That when you have the low megapascal cycling, high megapascal, you can actually run with the symmetric cell very long. But once you increase the pressure, your cell actually short very faster. So we did lot of the calculation into the paper. I'm not going through where the diffusivity and the flux of the lithium, how can then all the balance together, and why the 5 megapascal works. That you can read in this paper. But the most importantly that we can see the cell short from the electrochemistry behavior, but the voltage. But we never know whether it is shorted or something is happening. So for example, 5 megapascal cell, before and after, if you do the tomography, you don't see anything is inside. But when we have this cell which has been sorted basically to the lithium dendrite, we can see some kind of a the contrast difference into the cell with the tomography. But the cell, if we put a very high pressure, then basically we do not have to apply any kind of current. The cell itself short because the lithium kind of goes through solid electrolyte ports and cells. But then the problem is the lithium is something is a very light element. We cannot differentiate with the X-ray tomography lithium or is like a voice space, right? So for that, this some kind of a transmission microscopy of the same cell that we use for the X-ray microscopy. And then this is a typical LPSCL peak that we are getting for the cell which is sorted. We have lot of different peaks are there. Okay, the sorted cell. And these peaks are mostly all these elements and these materials will only form when the lithium dendrite forms and will react with the solid electrolyte. So this is an indirect way to justify how the lithium dendrite happens, and then actually lithium dendrite occurs, and then with the cells, and that is how the cell happens. And then some of the cells that we cycled before, which we could not able to cycle and we found the cell shortening happens. Then if we can control the pressure, we see we are able to cycle the cell very long time. So when you work on the lithium metal, being lithium metal is very soft in nature, the sack pressure is extremely important if you really want to cycle your battery for very long cycle life. And this is a typical solid state. We are the very few labs in the world who make solid state batteries, house cells in labs. And you can see, you can cut the cells, but you don't see any kind of light goes off. This you cannot do in the typical liquid cell. And see the solid state cells, you can keep at a 200 degrees Celsius. You don't dare to put your battery even at 60 degrees Celsius, typical liquid. But you can do with the solid state cell even at 200 degrees Celsius, and it works perfectly well. So yeah. So these are some of the collaborators who has a lot of solid state NMRs, neutrons, synchrotrons, and computations. Some of the funding and some of my lab members. So thank you.